Good morning and merry time of day. Welcome back to this episode of We Found This Fun Thrift Shop and Wanted to Show You. Brought to you by VoiceOver because goodness knows filming in public is already awkward enough without trying to not only think of what to say, but also actually make the mouth noises on top of it. But we found this second-hand vintagey shop in Horton while we were traveling. It is called Skatteboden or Treasure Booth, and they had a lot of fun stuff. Like these tiny spoons, old tea and coffee tins, and an old first aid chest for home use from the Swedish Red Cross dated to 1939. Although, personally, one of the things that fascinated me the most was this large copper water heating thing. This one is almost as tall as I am, like it's really huge. But one thing that drew my eye was this pale yellow summer dress with a lavender print. The fabric had this dry, crisp feel to it that I have come to associate with fairly new linen. And the top tag did indeed say linen blend. But blended with what? So I went digging for the other garment tag, the one with all the details. In my experience, this one is very often found along the left side seam for some reason. After some digging, I did eventually locate said garment tag, confirming that the outer layer lavender print fabric is a mix of linen and cotton, while the inner lining layer is 100% cotton. That all sounded good to me. We also found, and I would not have noticed if Spouse had not pointed it out, but hidden among a pile of scarves and shawls, there was this gorgeous pashmina shawl in just these beautiful colors and details. I adore these. They are incredibly light and warm, yet folds up surprisingly small. Perfect for travel blankets or just an extra layer in case the weather gets colder while out and about. In my time thrifting, this is the third pashmina shawl that I have found that is wool and silk, and I just love them. They are so soft and amazing. Spouse also encouraged me to try posing with it, like, how some men sometimes pose on dating apps with fish, and yeah, nailed it. Alright, we are back in the workroom, and the first thing we're gonna do in this instance is picking the seams apart and pressing her to see how much fabric we have. Now, even though I am unpicking the seams to start afresh, you will not catch me talking down on the hard-working sewists who made this miles and miles away from where I live. Often working grueling 12 to 16-hour days and breathing in large amounts of textile fiber dust in incredibly noisy factories, just filled with row after row of sewing machines. They may have stitched the long stitches that are part of clothes these days falling apart faster because it enables them to finish each garment that little bit faster, but they didn't order the ever faster production speed or insatiable demand for fast fashion. That responsibility came from somewhere else entirely. Also, I want to get rid of the branding and arbitrary sizing tags of gaslighting, but, details. Plus, by not just chopping off the top with one fell snip, we get to harvest this elastic for later projects. Useful. I am getting rid of the spaghetti straps though. They do not spark joy. And now for my favorite trick to reduce wrinkles, especially in linens. We are just going to spritz it with water, shake vigorously, and hang to dry overnight. It won't be as nice as pressing, of course, but by gob, it does save a lot of time and effort. Good morning. It is the next morning, and look. The hemfold is still there, but the front part, or the top section where all the pleats were, is so much straighter now. So let's get to work. Alright, we are back in the workroom with our joyous lavender fabric, and I just thought, because many months ago a viewer left a comment talking about how you can take a pattern from an existing trouser simply by folding one leg inside the other. And since these linen trousers are a very loose fit drawstring type of trouser, and they already fit me, I thought we might give that a try for another pair of some easy breezy, nice cooling summer outfits. So what I am doing first is just folding my fabric so that the side seams lay in the middle. Though, let it be known that it would have been easier if I had just seam ripped these two side seams as well. Next, I am attempting the aforementioned folding of one trouser leg inside of the other, taking special notice of the pleats in the front, back, and side seams, meaning we will need to mentally add more fabric here. But honestly, it is mainly that curved seat seam in the middle I am after. Now, linen is notoriously slightly translucent. So, for my own comfort, I am going to cut out some shorter trouser pieces from the lining, in addition to 2 sets of pockets. You know what? I think I'm going to open up those side seams just to make inserting those pockets even easier. Now, last time we brought Freya out to play, her tension was a little high, especially on thin, flimsy fabrics like these. Let us see if we can address that first. with Freya fit and ready to go, let us put her to work. First up, French seaming the pockets. Also, have I mentioned recently my adoration of French seams? You start out sewing right side to right side, which can be easier when you're thinking. Chop the seam allowance down to an even width. And then turn it inside out to stitch that same seam one more time, trapping your seam allowance within the seam itself and out of itching distance from your skin. If I'm feeling extra, I may fold the inside part down to either side and stitch it to the top of the fabric for an even less chance of irritating the skin. But for me, I find that a basic French seam often does that job just as well on its own. And on to the little lining shorts. Which also gives us a chance to check for any glaring fit issues. Discover that we didn't mentally add enough seam allowance for both the French seams and the hip darts, so cut the sides open to piece in more fabric. But that is what practice is for. Alright, let us move on to the outer layer. First up, the inseam, so that we shall not be mixing up which half of the trouser leg goes where. Hopefully. And a little inseam sacrificial patch going in while we are here anyway. It is still going to wear out, but hopefully not quite as fast. If you know, you know. With me, I also have our little friendly thread bunny, although mine could probably be a bit smaller than it is. But the main principle is just that on seams that end at the bottom of the fabric, so not things like hems where you go around and there's a fair bit left to the bottom of the fabric, you just keep sewing into this little extra piece of scrap cloth. With the thread secured, you can then snip your project free without that erstwhile pulling of a long thread from your spool and bobbin, just to make sure nothing has to be rethreaded next time. You may not save a whole lot of thread per seam doing this, but hopefully it could save quite a bit of thread over the lifetime of a spool of thread, or just imagine the lifetime of our sewing and mending journeys. Learning about such tiny things that can help us improve by just 1% or even 0.5% honestly just brings me so much joy. Next up, we have our darling pockets, which I shall endeavor to attach all by machine, because we do not have to run back to dear hand stitching over any old finicky anyway. Pockets. They go on the inside. Yeah. Who knew? Folding down this seam does make me miss those precious, easy French seams. But my brain could not brain how that would work with pockets and all of the things, so flat felled it is. One day I will learn to give myself more seam allowance to make things easier for myself, but it will not be this day. With our pockets finally wrangled into submission, we have just a side seam left on either leg and the center trouser seam left, before we can pin on our waistband. With our little lining shorts as well, of course. True to form though, I nope out of doing everything all at once. So I stitched a lining to the outer trouser first to reduce how much finagling needs to be done in each step. This also makes our job easier if we ever have to take the waistband off again and change the sizing later. For our drawstring, we will need some eyelet holes. And thin linen tape for the drawstring. And at last, hem the bottom of our trouser legs. And there you have it. One more pair of heatwave friendly legwear. Because you know as well as I do that it's not going to be our last. A most sincere thank you to our lovely patrons who keep supporting this channel through all our various shenanigans and explorations. I truly could not continue doing this without your support. Thank you. And if you are wondering how I knew that there would be enough fabric in this dress for these trousers, at what point in this journey did it look like I knew exactly what I was doing?